Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin with breaking news overnight. Donald Trump now faces a new set of criminal charges. For the fourth time, a prosecutor has issued an indictment against the former president, this time in Fulton County, Georgia, over efforts to overturn the 2020 election. 18 co-defendants are also facing charges, including former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis says she is charging all 19 defendants under the state's racketeering law.
The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result.
Fulton County DA Fannie Willis says she has authorized arrest warrants for the former president and his 18 co-defendants. They have until August 25th to surrender.
Well, Nathan, reaction is pouring into this latest indictment. Jeannie Sheehan-Zaino is a political contributor for Bloomberg.
This is a screaming indictment. It is long and it is detailed, but she said in her comments, you have a right to challenge the election in court, but you cannot engage in a criminal racketeering activity to overturn the results. And that's what all of these 19 individuals, including the former president and Rudolph Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and others, are charged with.
Jeannie Sheehan-Zaino notes the charges include 161 specific acts of racketeering by the former president. Bloomberg law host June Grasso says some are questioning the timing of the late-night indictment.
I am really surprised as to why she decided that she had to do a press conference at 11:45 at night when, most people are not going to be watching, people who are interested in this. And also it feeds into the Trump theory or the Trump allegations that this is happening all so fast and she's wrapping it up and it's just an indication that she's not taking the time, even though we know that she took 2.5 years.
Bloomberg law host June Grasso says the charges carry a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison and a maximum of 20.
Karen, Jeff Duncan is among those who testified before the Fulton County grand jury. He is a Republican and the former lieutenant governor of Georgia. Duncan spoke to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution outside the courthouse.
This is a pivot point for this country to do something more than just stew on the 2020 election cycle, right? We're either going to, as Republicans, take our medicine and realize the election wasn't rigged. Donald Trump was the worst candidate ever in the history of the party, even worse than Herschel Walker.
Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan testified before the Fulton County grand jury after receiving a subpoena earlier this month.
Well, Nathan, we'll have more on this latest indictment coming up shortly. But first, let's turn to the action in financial markets this morning. China is in focus yet again as data out of Beijing shows more evidence of a slowdown in the economy. That had China's central bank cut interest rates overnight by the most in 3 years. And Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has the details from Hong Kong.
The PBOC cut the rate on its one-year MLF loans by 15 basis points to 2.5%. It also lowered the 7-day reverse repo rate by 10 basis points to 1.8%. July's industrial output and retail sales missed estimates. Fixed asset investment from January to July also was worse than expected. Also adding to this, China will pause publishing its unemployment rate for young people. Authorities say the government wants to iron out complexities in the data. In June, the youth jobless rate was 21%. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And staying in Asia, we have an exclusive interview with the frontrunner in Taiwan's presidential race. Lai Ching-te is currently vice president of Taiwan, and he's promising to cooperate with China to achieve peace. That's despite Beijing's refusal to acknowledge Taiwan as a sovereign country. Lai says voters face a choice about democracy itself.
We don't want to be enemies. We can be friends. And we love to see China can enjoy democracy and freedom just like us. As long as there is parity and dignity, our door is always open. We are willing to cooperate with China to advance peace and prosperity.
Taiwan Vice President Lai Ching-te spoke exclusively to Bloomberg as he kicks off a trip to the U.S. China's foreign ministry has condemned the visit.
Well, back here in the U.S., Nathan, stocks are poised to start the day with losses. Retail could be a catalyst for traders today. Home Depot reports earnings this morning, and we also get the July reading on U.S. retail sales. Economists forecast a gain of 0.4%.
We're watching data in Europe, Karen. UK wage growth is accelerating at its strongest pace on record. Average pay in the UK rose 7.8% in the second quarter. That's the highest since records began in 2001. The reading likely means the Bank of England will keep raising rates.
And finally, Nathan, let's get you the latest moves by Warren Buffett. Regulatory filings show Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway continues to cut its stake in Activision Blizzard. The conglomerate also exited other positions in the second quarter, including Chevron. So what's Buffett buying? Well, it looks like he's betting on housing. Berkshire disclosed positions in Homebuilders, D.R. Horton, NVR, and Lennar. And it's 5:07 on Wall Street. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Amy Morris. Amy, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The death toll from the Maui wildfires has reached at least 99. Federal response teams are on the ground in Maui, helping with critical assistance with those who've lost everything. Bloomberg's Nancy Lyons has more on the government's response.
FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says they're providing an immediate payment of $700 to each resident to cover essentials. They're also using hotels to house those left homeless.
We do have adequate funding to do the response that we're doing right now. But we will need additional funding to ensure that all of our other recovery projects can continue and not get delayed until the next fiscal year.
FEMA has warned that its disaster fund is projected to fall into the red this month because of money already committed to disasters. Officials have sought additional money from Congress. Nancy Lyons, Bloomberg Radio.
Hawaii Governor Josh Green says more than 80% of the structures destroyed were residential, and they were also older buildings. That's created an environmental hazard.
There's asbestos in the air down there, and they're heavy metals. And we're getting environmental assessments as rapidly as we can from Department of Health, and EPA is here.
Residents are also bracing for a higher death toll in what is already the deadliest wildfire event in more than a century in the U.S. as recovery efforts continue. First, NOAA, now NASA, warning about a dramatic increase in the Earth's climate temperature. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter brings us that part of the story.
A direct warning about climate change from NASA Director Bill Nelson.
Folks, Mother Nature is sending us a message, and that message is we better act now.
And says the Earth is warming at an alarming rate.
And what we find is that July of this year, the temperatures are the hottest ever on record.
And he points to the droughts, the storms, and wildfires like Maui. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Now back in San Francisco, crime in that city has gotten so bad, federal workers are being told to work from home for the foreseeable future. The San Francisco Chronicle reports that Health and Human Services issued the work from home advisory because of unsafe conditions around the federal building there. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Amy, thank you. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower. John.
Karen, Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook have been top-notch running backs in the NFL for several years. Both are now joining new teams, and both those teams are in the AFC East. Elliott spent 7 years in Dallas, but he lost his starting job there to Tony Pollard after a season where he averaged under 4 yards per carry. He's going to the Patriots for a one-year deal where he can make up to $6 million. He's going to wear number 15. That was his number at Ohio State. And Elliott will face his old team. The Patriots visit the Cowboys on October 1st. Cook, 4 straight Pro Bowls in Minnesota, but he's coming off shoulder surgery in February. He was released by the Vikings, and he signed with the Jets where he can make up to $8.6 million. The Jets could only afford to do this because of the $35 million pay cut that Aaron Rodgers agreed to. Another running back is Jonathan Taylor. He's back at Colts camp, but still on the physically unable to perform list because of an ankle injury, and Taylor wants a new contract with Indianapolis or a trade. Zach Martin was holding out in Dallas. The 6-time All-Pro guard has ended the holdout. He's going to make $18 million this year and next. The college football season will begin with Georgia ranked number 1. That hadn't happened since 2008. The Bulldogs are the 2-time defending national champions. Michigan is ranked 2nd. Baseball, Giants blown out by Tampa Bay 10-2. A's lost in St. Louis 7-5. The Orioles a 4-1 win at San Diego. The Yankees lost in Atlanta 11-3. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager, and once again, former President Donald Trump faces criminal charges over efforts to overturn the 2020 election. This latest indictment comes from Fulton County, Georgia, and it includes 18 co-defendants. District Attorney Fani Willis is accusing all of them of violating state racketeering law.
To accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21.
DA Fani Willis announced the indictment late last night. She says she hopes to try the former president and the 18 others within 6 months, and she's giving them 10 days to surrender. For more, we're joined now by Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Your reaction, Greg, to the indictment and the timing?
Well, good morning, Nathan. I would say that the biggest problem of all is that they cannot get this done in 6 months or less, despite what she said. I think that if once you factor in appeals next year, it could be Election Day, November 5th of next year, before there's any resolution. With this many cases, this many indictments, a decent percentage will drag into late 2024. You could have a president or president-elect who's been found guilty.
Let's talk about this indictment specifically. We have 18 co-defendants along with the former president. They're facing 41 counts, accused of 161 specific acts in furtherance of a conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. It sounds a lot more sweeping than even what we heard from the special counsel, Jack Smith, in a similar case.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that in all of these cases, there's a common theme, and that is that the prosecutors want to get some plea bargains. Of the 18 people who were charged yesterday in Atlanta, I think there's a decent chance that 2 or 3 or 4 will cut a deal and make things even more difficult for Donald Trump.
Does that add to the difficulty that you're implying here in terms of the timing? If we do start to see some of these co-defendants potentially make a deal and potentially line themselves up as witnesses against the former president?
It's entirely possible. I think that the prosecutors know that a lot of these potential slippers, as you might say, don't want to spend their late 70s in jail, and that's entirely possible for somebody like Rudy Giuliani. So, yeah, I think there's a high likelihood that at least some of them will slip.
What do you make of the scope of the investigation here? It took 2.5 years for Fani Willis to bring these charges that were highly anticipated, and it looks from the indictment that it goes well beyond that infamous find me the votes phone call that the former president had with Georgia's Secretary of State.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of evidence that's not been released yet in terms of harassment of voting officials, in terms of trying to get these charges changed. So my sense is that there's still a lot more in these cases still to be brought out.
Do you get the sense that this is a stronger case than some of the others? Does it stack up that way for you?
You know, I've thought all along, Nathan, that the strongest one could be the documents in Florida. That's a pretty straightforward case. It's a felony. You can't take documents out of the White House and bring them to your home. All 4 of these are pretty strong, and I have a hunch that the document case could be the first one resolved.
Does it complicate that case to have this one brought now? I mean, we've talked before about how the schedule is going to get. I mean, it is a lot more complicated heading into a 2024 presidential race. And now you have all these overlapping cases potentially running up against each other.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to have a president, a candidate for the presidency, actually having to campaign on weekends, on holidays. He's not going to be able to campaign probably full time because of all these charges. And we shouldn't overlook the fact that Joe and Hunter Biden are part of this narrative also. I think they will be dragged into this, but what has been alleged in terms of Trump far exceed, in my opinion, what the Bidens have done.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.